the war that erased empires, the Middle Eastern front of World War I. They told you World War I was fought in the trenches of France. They lied. The real war, the one that shaped the world you live in today, happened in a desert thousands of miles away, and almost nobody talks about it. When you think about the First World War, you picture muddy trenches, barbed wire, and soldiers freezing in Belgium. But while Europe was tearing itself apart, an entire empire was collapsing in the Middle East. Cities that had stood for thousands of years were being sieged. Deserts were turning into battlefields, and the map of the entire region was being redrawn with blood and bullets. This is the story of the war that nobody remembers, but everyone still lives with the consequences of. By 1914, the Ottoman Empire had ruled the Middle East for over 400 years. From the shores of the Mediterranean to the Persian Gulf, from the mountains of Anatolia to the deserts of Arabia, the Ottomans controlled everything. Constantinople was the beating heart of an empire that stretched across 3 continents. But the empire was dying. They called it the sick man of Europe. Internal corruption had rotted it from the inside. Technology had passed it by. Nationalist movements were pulling it apart at the seams. And when Archduke Franz Ferdinand was shot in Sarajevo in June 1914, the Ottomans faced a choice that would seal their fate. The empire's leaders, a group of ambitious military officers known as the Young Turks, decided to bet everything on one alliance. They joined the Central Powers, siding with Germany and Austria-Hungary against Britain, France, and Russia. It was a gamble that would cost them everything. The British and French weren't just fighting for territory. They wanted to control the future. Oil had just been discovered in Persia and Mesopotamia. The Suez Canal in Egypt was the lifeline of the British Empire, connecting London to India. And the holy cities of Jerusalem, Mecca, and Medina held symbolic power that could rally millions. This wasn't just another front in a European war. This was a fight for the future of an entire civilization. The first shots in the Middle Eastern theater didn't come from the Ottomans. They came from the British. In November 1914, just weeks after the Ottomans entered the war, British Indian forces landed at the mouth of the Shatt al-Arab waterway in southern Mesopotamia. Their target was Basra, a critical port city that controlled access to the Persian Gulf. The British needed to protect their oil interests in Persia, and they needed to do it fast. The initial assault was almost easy. Ottoman defenses in Basra were weak, undermanned, and unprepared. Within days, British forces had secured the city and began pushing north along the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. The plan seemed simple: march to Baghdad, knock the Ottomans out of Mesopotamia, and secure the oil fields. But nothing in this war would be simple. As British forces advanced deeper into Mesopotamia, they stretched their supply lines dangerously thin. The desert was brutal. Temperatures soared above 120 degrees Fahrenheit in the summer. Water was scarce. Disease spread through the ranks like wildfire. Dysentery, malaria, and cholera killed more men than bullets did. And the Ottomans were waiting. By 1915, British forces had pushed all the way to Ctesiphon, just 20 miles south of Baghdad. They were so close they could almost taste victory. General Charles Townshend, commanding the British Indian force, was confident. He believed one more push would break the Ottoman lines and deliver Baghdad into British hands. He was wrong. The Battle of Ctesiphon in November 1915 was a disaster. Ottoman forces, reinforced and resupplied, hit the British with everything they had. The battle lasted 4 days. The heat was unbearable. Men fought in trenches filled with sand, dust choking their lungs, the sun beating down without mercy. When the smoke cleared, over 4,500 British and Indian soldiers were dead or wounded. Townshend had no choice but to retreat. His army fell back to the town of Kut al-Amara, a small settlement on the banks of the Tigris River. The plan was to regroup, resupply, and wait for reinforcements, but the Ottomans had other ideas. They surrounded the town. The siege of Kut lasted 147 days. It remains one of the most brutal sieges in modern military history. Inside the town, over 13,000 soldiers and thousands of civilians were trapped with dwindling supplies. Food ran out within weeks. Soldiers ate their horses, then their mules, then anything they could find. Disease ravaged the population. Men died of starvation in the streets. The British tried to break the siege 4 times. Each attempt failed. Thousands more soldiers died trying to reach Kut, only to be cut down by Ottoman machine guns and artillery. By April 1916, Townshend had no choice. He surrendered. Over 13,000 British and Indian soldiers were taken prisoner. It was the largest surrender of British forces since the American Revolutionary War. The prisoners were marched across the desert to prison camps in Anatolia. Thousands of them never made it. They died on the march, their bodies left to rot in the sand. The fall of Kut was a humiliation for the British Empire, but it was just the beginning. While Mesopotamia was turning into a graveyard for British ambitions, another front was opening to the west, and this one would change everything. The Sinai and Palestine campaign began in 1915 when Ottoman forces, backed by German advisors, launched an attack on the Suez Canal. The canal was the jugular vein of the British Empire. If the Ottomans could seize it, they could cut Britain off from India, Australia, and New Zealand. The entire war effort in the East would collapse. The attack failed. Ottoman forces managed to cross the Sinai Desert, but they couldn't hold their ground. British defenses, bolstered by Egyptian and Anzac troops, pushed them back. The canal was saved. But the British weren't satisfied with defense. They wanted to go on the offensive. They wanted to march all the way to Jerusalem. The problem was the Sinai Desert. It was a barren wasteland, hundreds of miles of sand, rock, and scorching heat. No army could cross it without water, and there was no water to be found. So the British built a railway. Starting in 1916, British engineers constructed a railway line across the Sinai, mile by mile, sleeper by sleeper. They built water pipelines alongside it, pumping water from the Nile all the way to the front lines. It was an engineering marvel, one of the greatest logistical achievements of the war. And it worked. By late 1916, British forces under General Archibald Murray had pushed across the Sinai and reached the borders of Palestine. The Ottomans, entrenched in Gaza, were waiting. The First Battle of Gaza in March 1917 was a bloody stalemate. British forces attacked the city but couldn't break through. The Second Battle of Gaza in April was even worse. Thousands of men died in frontal assaults against fortified Ottoman positions. Barbed wire, machine guns, and artillery turned the battlefield into a slaughterhouse. Murray was replaced. The new commander was a man named Edmund Allenby, and he brought with him a completely different strategy. Allenby didn't want to smash his way through Ottoman defenses. He wanted to outflank them. He gathered intelligence, studied the terrain, and planned a massive deception operation. He made the Ottomans believe he was going to attack Gaza again, but instead he attacked Beersheba, a town 50 miles to the east. The Third Battle of Gaza in October 1917 was a masterpiece of military strategy. While Ottoman forces waited for an assault on Gaza, Australian light horse troops charged across open desert and seized Beersheba in a daring cavalry assault. With their flank exposed, the Ottomans had no choice but to retreat. The road to Jerusalem was open. But taking the holy city would be no easy task. Jerusalem was more than just a strategic target. It was a symbol. For Christians, it was the city where Jesus was crucified and resurrected. For Muslims, it was the site of the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Dome of the Rock. For Jews, it was the ancient capital of Israel, the site of the destroyed temple. Whoever controlled Jerusalem controlled the hearts and minds of millions. The Ottoman garrison in Jerusalem was well fortified. The hills surrounding the city provided natural defensive positions, but Allenby was patient. He didn't rush. He moved his forces carefully, encircling the city, cutting off supply routes and tightening the noose. By early December 1917, the Ottoman commander in Jerusalem realized the situation was hopeless. Rather than see the holy city destroyed in battle, he ordered a withdrawal. On December 11, 1917, General Edmund Allenby entered Jerusalem on foot. He walked through the Jaffa Gate, dismounting from his horse out of respect for the sacred city. It was a moment of immense symbolism. For the first time in nearly 800 years, Jerusalem was in Christian hands. The fall of Jerusalem sent shockwaves through the Muslim world. The Ottomans had lost one of the holiest cities in Islam, but the British weren't done yet. They wanted Damascus. While conventional British forces were pushing through Palestine, another war was being fought in the Arabian desert, and this war was unlike anything the world had ever seen. It was a guerrilla war, a war of sabotage, ambush, and hit-and-run tactics, and at the center of it was a British officer named T. Lawrence. You probably know him as Lawrence of Arabia. Lawrence wasn't a traditional soldier. He was an archaeologist, a scholar who had spent years studying the Middle East. But when the war broke out, British intelligence recruited him to work with Arab tribes who were rebelling against Ottoman rule. The Arabs had every reason to hate the Ottomans. For centuries, they had been ruled by Constantinople, their resources extracted, their people conscripted into wars they didn't care about. The Young Turks, who controlled the Ottoman government, had pushed a policy of Turkification, trying to erase Arab culture and identity. The British saw an opportunity. If they could unite the Arab tribes and turn them against the Ottomans, they could open a new front in the war. They promised the Arabs independence. They promised them their own nation. It was a lie, but the Arabs didn't know that yet. Lawrence embedded himself with the Arab forces, led by Emir Faisal, son of Sharif Hussein of Mecca. Together, they launched a campaign of guerrilla warfare that would cripple Ottoman supply lines and communication networks. Their primary target was the Hejaz Railway, the Ottoman lifeline that connected Damascus to Medina. The railway carried troops, weapons, and supplies. If the Arabs could cut it, they could isolate Ottoman forces in the south. And that's exactly what they did. Lawrence and the Arab forces became masters of sabotage. They blew up bridges, derailed trains, and ambushed Ottoman patrols. They moved through the desert like ghosts, striking without warning and disappearing before reinforcements could arrive. One of their most famous victories came in July 1917 at the Battle of Aqaba. Aqaba was a strategic port on the Red Sea, heavily defended by Ottoman forces. The defenses faced the sea, expecting an amphibious assault, but Lawrence had a different plan. He led a small force of Arab fighters on a grueling march across the Nefa Desert, one of the most inhospitable places on Earth. They traveled for weeks under the scorching sun, surviving on minimal water and rations. When they finally reached Aqaba, they attacked from the land side, where defenses were weakest. The Ottomans never saw it coming. Aqaba fell with minimal casualties. The victory gave the British a critical port and dealt a devastating blow to Ottoman morale. Lawrence became a legend. But the Arab Revolt was about more than just military victories. It was about identity. For the first time in centuries, Arabs were fighting for themselves, not for some distant empire. They believed they were fighting for freedom. They had no idea what the British and French had planned for them. In May 1916, even as they were promising independence to the Arabs, the British and French signed a secret agreement called the Sykes-Picot Agreement. It divided the Middle East into spheres of influence, carving up the region between the two colonial powers. There would be no independent Arab nation, just new masters replacing the old ones. The Arabs would discover this betrayal after the war, and the consequences of that betrayal are still being felt today. By 1918, the Ottoman Empire was on its knees. British forces had taken Jerusalem. The Arab Revolt had crippled Ottoman supply lines, and in Mesopotamia, the British had finally avenged their defeat at Kut. In March 1917, British forces under General Stanley Maude launched a new offensive on Baghdad. This time they were better prepared. Supply lines were secure, reinforcements were plentiful, and the Ottomans were exhausted. The Battle of Baghdad lasted only a few days. Ottoman forces, outnumbered and outgunned, retreated north. On March 11, 1917, British forces entered Baghdad. For the first time in over 500 years, the city was no longer under Ottoman control. Maude issued a proclamation to the people of Baghdad. He told them that the British had come as liberators, not conquerors. He promised them freedom and self-determination. It was another lie. But the fall of Baghdad was a turning point. With Mesopotamia secured, the British could focus all their energy on Syria and Palestine. The final blow came in September 1918 at the Battle of Megiddo. General Allenby, commanding British, Australian, New Zealand, and Indian forces, launched a massive offensive against Ottoman positions in northern Palestine. The battle was a complete rout. Ottoman forces collapsed within days. Thousands of soldiers surrendered. Entire divisions disintegrated. Allenby didn't stop. His forces raced north, capturing Haifa, Acre, and Beirut in rapid succession. By the end of September, they were at the gates of Damascus. The Arab forces, led by Faisal and Lawrence, entered Damascus on October 1, 1918. The city erupted in celebration. After 400 years of Ottoman rule, the Arabs believed they were finally free. 2 days later, Allenby arrived. He made it clear that Syria was now under British control. The dream of Arab independence was already slipping away. On October 30, 1918, the Ottoman Empire signed the Armistice of Mudros, officially ending its involvement in World War I. The empire that had ruled the Middle East for 4 centuries was finished. The First World War didn't just destroy the Ottoman Empire. It destroyed an entire way of life. The map of the Middle East was redrawn by British and French diplomats who had never set foot in the region. They drew lines on maps with rulers, cutting through tribal lands, separating families, and creating borders that made no sense. Iraq was born from the wreckage of Mesopotamia. Syria and Lebanon were carved out of the Levant. Palestine was placed under British control, and the seeds of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict were planted with the Balfour Declaration, a British promise to create a Jewish homeland in Palestine. The Arabs, who had fought and died believing they were winning their freedom, watched as new colonial powers took control. The betrayal they felt would fuel resistance movements, revolutions, and conflicts for the next century. The Battle of Karemeh, the Siege of Jerusalem, the battles in Iraq. These weren't just footnotes in a European war. They were the moments that shaped the modern Middle East. Every conflict you see in the news today, every border dispute, every ethnic tension, every drop of blood spilled in Syria, Iraq, and Palestine can be traced back to the decisions made between 1914 and 1918. The war that was supposed to end all wars created a region that has never known peace. The empires are gone, but the scars remain. If this opened your eyes to history they don't teach in schools, hit subscribe.